and really, the question that you had just on the screen here is, I really don't I don't have a good answer to the question, I guess, because and this is the question that has been really kind of posed to me, Mark, on many different occasions, not necessarily just you and me, but just talking. Like, where does Caleb Williams feel like going is going to help him, number one, and why does he feel like being at Oklahoma is going to maybe not necessarily allow him to do that. And honestly, Mark, the only thing that I can think of is offensive line. You made this point very, very, very well yesterday that maybe he doesn't feel that the offensive line is in a position that's good enough to carry him to where he wants to be, which is not necessarily a Heisman Trophy guy, but just to be a first round draft pick or a number one draft pick, whatever you want to say. And so, obviously, money has nothing to do with the fact of how it's going to improve his draft stock, right? So, I mean, you have to be blind to think. I don't know how much money is and I say money, just an NIL thing situation is a catalyst to this whole thing. I mean, I've got to think it's part of it, but him and his father have come out repeatedly and have said that NIL is playing no bearing whatsoever in this. So I mean, I guess we'll see, right, when it happens. But yeah, the only thing that I can think of is he wants to go to a team that is solidified on the offensive line. Now, you know, who is that, right? I mean, there's been discussion about Texas A&M. There's been discussion about Auburn as of late, North Carolina, UCLA. So I think the Georgia thing was early on, but I don't think that's real. I mean, for both sides, it doesn't really. I don't think it makes sense for either side. But yeah, that's the only thing that I can think of, Mark. At this point, it has to be offensive line. I'm trying to think of anything in Levy's system that would, really not play to his strength as it is primarily RPO. So he would get a chance to run the football a lot, which is obviously very explosive. Running the football, but yeah, I just keep coming back to the offensive line being maybe the tipping point on what his decision is.
Yeah, if I was Caleb Williams or anybody else that was a quarterback with first round potential and I was looking for a landing spot to prepare me for the NFL in the best possible way, yes, three things generally would come into consideration. One would be what style of offense does this particular school run, which at this point, I don't think that there are too many top level, we're talking top 30 teams in the country that would run an offense that would be adverse to preparing for the NFL. So I wouldn't think that that would be much of a consideration, but you could really take a deep dive into offensive approach and really what fits you. And then number two would be the quarterback coach and the head coach, and do they develop quarterbacks? Do they have a history of that? And then number three, what we just hit on at length yesterday and then also today, just the complementary personnel. Are the weapons going to make me look good? Is the offensive line? Two things with the offensive line. Number one, keeping me healthy. Number two, allowing me, because they're keeping me upright, to make the plays.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sort of, Mark. I think even now I'm a little bit naive. I think still. I mean, I'm embracing it, but I'm a little bit naive to the fact that money might play a bigger role in this than maybe I've mentioned.
Yeah.
I've heard, and I don't know if this is reputable. I saw this. Maybe you saw this as well. That the Texas A&M boosters spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to $40 million on NIL deals for this 2022 recruiting class. So, um, I mean, that's what college football is about now from a recruiting. Whoever has their boosters, whoever has the deepest pockets, are who's going to get the best players. I mean, I hate to think that, and there's still some kids, you know. I think there's still some kids that are going to go to schools that really give them the best opportunity to go to the next level and to win a national championship and all those things. But it does seem like there's a lot of kids, and at that age you get thrown that amount of money, whether it's whether we talk pay for play, NIL, whatever it is. It's very, very difficult to pass up knowing that, hey, maybe this isn't the place that I necessarily thought about going or dreamed of going, but hey, they can, as good as anybody, they can get me to the next level. Plus, they're setting me up financially. So maybe it's a money grab. I think that's what someone said in one of the comments that as good of I think the perception was that after Riley left, that Oklahoma, the sky was falling, but they still were an 11-win team and still have tons of talent on that team. So if he's going somewhere, if it's not offensive line, then maybe that's what it is.
So I had a conversation with our guy Andrew Hattersley with Gig'em 247 Sports, Texas A&M, just the other day, and he was pretty upfront about yes, the boosters raising money to support the recruiting efforts. So this is where I have an issue. So it's one thing to allow NIL in regards to just being an American citizen and having that right to earn money based on your name, image, and likeness. Okay. So I see that as Joe Blow's car dealership or lemonade or whatever it is, or so forth, wanting, an influencer, to use the modern term, to promote their product. And that and then whether that's also signing jerseys and memorabilia and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
that these athletes have that right as Americans to profit from that. But just flat out raising money. So basically they are, even though it's not going to try to correlate it to digging a ditch, it is technically work, what I just described. They are endorsing, they are a front man for, there's something there. There's an exchange of value, um, goods or services for the NIL money. Um, this just kind of reeks of just a handout with nothing else involved. So that's kind of where I have an issue. So we also, let's see, have some comments. I think you left us there for a second, Jason. So I don't know if you caught where
Yeah,
we were.
I got most of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so Russ here believes that Caleb Williams is just flat out overrated. Uh, just doesn't have inaccurate in particular. Do you even think that he would beat out Dylan Gabriel?
So here's my thought on the comparison between Caleb Williams and Gabriel, and I think where Russ kind of gets the lack of accuracy is, he struggled in a couple of games leading up to that Bedlam game. He struggled. He was below 50% completion percentage against Baylor, as well. So I think. I would not necessarily agree with that. I don't think that he's overrated at all. I do think that Caleb Williams um, is the better player overall. Obviously, he's much more explosive in the running game, without a doubt. Much more explosive in the running game. I think the jury's out in terms of which one of them's a better passer. I would lean right now in their career, right now where they're at. I would lean towards Dylan Gabriel being a little bit more of a polished passer. from an accuracy perspective. But I think what Oklahoma is going to see this next year, assuming that Dylan Gabriel is the guy, you can make an argument, Mark, and I don't know. I mean, you can tell me if you've watched both of these kids a lot. You can tell me if you feel like I'm crazy. I think I could make an argument that Dylan Gabriel could be a better fit for Oklahoma next year. Not a better player in any sense of the word, but could be a better fit. Knows Jeff Lebby's offense extremely well. Has played in it for multiple years. Is a guy who's not. He doesn't have the speed of Caleb Williams without a doubt, but he is a threat in the run game. So I think when you look at him, I think he's probably somewhere in between a Spencer Rattler and a Caleb Williams. Obviously, not as slow and as much of kind of a statue as Spencer was back there, but certainly doesn't have the elusiveness and the speed and the in the running ability that Caleb does. But he does run well enough to keep you honest. I think I'd looked yesterday. I think Dylan Gabriel has somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 yards rushing for his career. So I mean, obviously you take some of those quarterback sack yards away from that. So not a ton, but I think good enough to keep some of these teams honest.
Yeah, really, the only impression that comes to mind to separate the two players in particular, seeing that I watched Caleb Williams play, of course, once he entered the Texas game and then the bigger games down the stretch, and certainly the Oklahoma State game and the Baylor game was probably the struggle in my eyes from what I remember of his season versus Dylan Gabriel would be, I think Gabriel at this stage of his career, having played the amount of football that he has, plays a little more under control is the best way I can describe it. Caleb Williams seems at times when he's at his worst to be just kind of throwing his body out there and just kind of out of control. While Dylan Gabriel seems to be more or less running the offense and more in control of his game at this point.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that comes with experience, right? I mean, Caleb made a lot of true freshman type decisions this year, right? I mean, and then I think Oklahoma knew that when he was thrust into the starting quarterback role after Texas, right? You're going to see a lot of good, but there's going to be some typical true freshman stuff that you see that's not the best in the world, right? So I think Oklahoma dealt with that and took the good with some of the bad. So yeah, no, I think you saw at times where he was he was out of control a little bit. But the one of the things that I had always loved about Caleb is his leadership ability that he had as a true freshman. We talked about this when he took over for Spencer Rattler against Texas and what he was able to do to get Oklahoma a win in that game. Showed a lot of leadership and obviously a team that had rallied around him. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of one of the other comments, I think he's going to be successful. I wouldn't say anywhere he goes, but if he's in the right situation, I think he'll be successful. He will improve his accuracy from a passing side, and he'll learn to play within the offense and settle down a little bit, I think.
And as we've talked about before, with this transfer portal and the development of quarterbacks at the high school level, I just think we've come to a point where, and we weren't at this point in college football 15, 20 years ago, and it's just slowly changed, where there are just multiple quarterbacks on every roster that are capable of taking over the team and hitting 65% of their passes and throwing for at least 25 touchdowns, if not more, and having a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 touchdown to pick ratio. And they're good passers. They're good quarterbacks. They're talented. They're athletic. And there are just multiples of these guys, whereas most in most situations in college football, even among the best teams 25, 30 years ago, you didn't have NFL quarterbacks as backup quarterbacks in college football, like guys that could legitimately get drafted or be a free agent in an NFL camp and find themselves with a clipboard in their hands with a 5-year NFL career. And they never started in or rarely started in college and struggled to get a starting spot in college. That the quarterback position is that deep now, whereas 30 years ago, you didn't know what you were getting if the starting quarterback, even at Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, went down. It was like, wow, we're in trouble. They've just been developed so well, and there's so many of them, and they're so good at throwing the ball these days. And again, with all these camps and the amount of professional attention that's been given to these elite players at a young age, I just think they're they're really good.
No, you're absolutely right. I think historically you would say you get the backup in there, you've got a much, much better opportunity to win the game or at least take advantage of that, right? And that's not obviously not necessarily the case this day and age, right? You obviously you throw the Oklahoma situation out there. I'm trying to, even with Alabama a few years ago, know that both Tua Tagovailoa and then also Jalen Hurts have both been starters, but then you've got a guy that hasn't really played hardly at all year, and then he's thrust into the SEC championship game, and look how he played. So yeah, it's different. It's a different situation. You need, much like in the NFL, you need two starter quality quality guys to be able to, because the chances of somebody somebody getting hurt or whatever is pretty high. So yeah, I think that's very consistent across the country.